Welcome back, everyone. We've got another deep dive for you. You listeners sent in some really interesting stuff about goals and, really making the most of your time. And it all comes down to this one really intriguing idea. Who, not how. It's like what is it, like a secret weapon to get things done. And I'm really excited to just dig into it with you.
Yeah, it really is. It's a powerful framework. It really challenges us to rethink the way we go about pursuing our goals. And it applies to almost every part of our lives too. Like from those big career aspirations to the everyday things that we all face.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm one of those people who likes to figure things out on my own, but I'm starting to see how important it is to bring in the right people.
Yeah. And it's really fascinating. There's actually research on this. A lot of the breakthroughs, creative breakthroughs, they actually happen outside of work.
Mm.
Like only 16% of them actually occur while we're at our desks. So it's kind of like freeing up your time and mental energy by collaborating can unlock this whole new level of innovation and problem solving.
Wow, that's incredible. I never thought about it that way. And you've got some amazing examples in the stuff you sent over, like Michael Jordan's legendary basketball career, which we'll get to in a minute. There's this story about a millionaire who learns this lesson the hard way, and a lawyer who really transformed her work-life balance by hiring strategically. It's a pretty diverse mix of stories, and I think it'll really resonate with people who are feeling maybe a little stuck or overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think so too. Each of the stories kind of gives us a different perspective on how we can apply this principle in totally different contexts. And I think you'll find some surprising takeaways.
Okay, so let's start with Michael Jordan. I mean, everyone knows MJ. He's the ultimate self-made superstar, right? But one thing that really jumped out at me from your notes was that even someone as talented as Jordan, he didn't achieve his goals alone.
Yeah, it's easy to fall into that trap of thinking that people that are exceptionally talented or successful get there through their own grit and determination. But if we look at Jordan's journey, we see that he had a really carefully cultivated network of support. He had Phil Jackson as his coach.
Mhm.
He had expert trainers, a really talented team. His family was supportive. He had mentors too. All of these who's really played a part in shaping his path.
It's true. It's like we focus on the highlight reel, those big game-winning shots, but we often forget about the hours of practice, the guidance that he had, the emotional support. It goes into shaping a champion.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a good reminder for us that even the most impressive achievements are rarely, almost never actually, solo endeavors.
So, if Michael Jordan, with all his talent and all his drive, needed a team of who's, it really makes you think, like, who do we need, to reach our potential? Think about a project you're working on right now. Like, who's on your team? Are there any who's that you're maybe overlooking? People who could offer you, valuable insight or support.
Yeah, that's a good question. It was about figuring out what you're good at and then finding the right people to sort of complement your strengths. You don't have to be an expert at everything.
Okay, well, speaking of experts, let's move on to this story about Wes. He's a millionaire, and he almost died trying to fix his air conditioner. I mean, this guy had just sold a company, was clearly successful, but he still had that whole I can do it myself attitude.
Oh, Wes, yeah. His story really shows us the contrast between what we call a cost mindset and an investment mindset. He was so focused on like saving money that he didn't see the value of his own time or his expertise. And if he had hired a professional that could not only save him a trip to the hospital, but also freed up his time to focus on things that could make way more money than that air conditioner repair would have cost him.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Like, we get so caught up in saving a few bucks that we don't see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
We might be missing out on big opportunities by hanging on to tasks that really aren't our specialty.
Exactly. And it connects to this concept that we see again and again in all the stuff you sent. The idea is that our motivation, like, it usually follows what we see as demand. So, like, when we feel the pressure to get something done, like the deadline is coming up, suddenly we find a way to do it. But when it comes to investing in ourselves, in hiring these who's, we often hesitate.
Yeah, it's like we need to create that same sense of urgency to delegate those tasks and build those support systems. It's not being selfish, it's an investment.
I agree. Think about it. Would you rather be spending your weekend fixing that leaky faucet or coming up with a new business idea that could really make a difference?
That's a no-brainer. And this next story, this one really hit home for me. It's about podcasting. It's about a podcast producer who was just drowning in scheduling logistics.
Oh, yeah, I know that one. It
Mm.
really highlights that thing we call decision fatigue It's this state of mental exhaustion. It sets in after we've made too many decisions, and it affects all of us.
I can relate to that. I used to think I had to handle all the podcast scheduling myself, but it wasn't until I hired my assistant that I realized how much energy I was wasting on something that wasn't my core skill. It was like this huge weight lifted off my shoulders.
And how did that affect your work on the podcast?
Oh, it was a game changer. I was finally able to really focus on the creative side of things, like coming up with new ideas and researching topics, connecting with guests on a deeper level. The podcast got so much better.
That's a perfect example of how even something that seems small, like delegating a task, can really free up your mind to focus on what matters most.
Yeah, it's powerful. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by all the decisions you're making each day, you're not alone. Decision fatigue is real. It affects your ability to focus on your most important work. So ask yourself, what decisions are you making that someone else could handle? What's draining your energy and stopping you from reaching your full potential?
It's interesting you mentioned feeling overwhelmed. A lot of this material we've been looking at talks about becoming the buyer in relationships. And I think it really fits with what we're talking about here.
Oh, okay. The buyer.
Mm.
Usually when I hear buyer, I think about like going shopping for groceries or a new pair of shoes. How does that apply to relationships?
Well, it's kind of like this. We need to see our time, our energy, our expertise as valuable resources, right? So instead of always trying to prove ourselves, please everyone, we can be a little more selective about where we invest our energy in relationships.
I see. So it's about being intentional. Just like when you're buying something, you don't just buy anything. You want something, good quality, good value, something that fits.
Yeah, exactly. Think about it. 10 years ago, you probably had different priorities, different interests. Even your style was probably different, right? The relationships that were good for you then might not be the ones you need now.
That's true. It's like our relationships need to grow with us, right?
Yeah.
It's not about ditching old friends or anything, but realizing that sometimes we need to make room for new connections, ones that fit with where we are in life now.
And one thing that can help us do that is, you guessed it, delegating to the right who's. You sent that story about Shannon Waller, that entrepreneurial coach. She had a real aha moment after she hired her first executive assistant.
Oh, right. She realized that when she freed up her time, her mental energy, she could actually see what was important more clearly. It's like cleaning out the clutter in your house. You suddenly have space to breathe.
That's a great analogy. Exactly. So Shannon delegated those draining tasks, and suddenly she had time for what she was best at, the stuff that she really loved. It's about recognizing, you don't have to be everything to everyone.
Right, you don't. Okay, so that leads perfectly into this next part, which is all about building those deeper, more fulfilling relationships, what they call transformational relationships. And I really like how they bring in Joe Polish's perspective on this. He's the founder of Genius Network, right?
He is. Yeah, he's got some really great insights on how to build those connections, the ones that, not only help you professionally, but also really enrich your life.
And he uses this really interesting analogy. He compares relationships to clothing. Like we wouldn't wear something that doesn't fit well or feels uncomfortable, right? We want our clothes to be functional and stylish.
Exactly. And it's the same with relationships. You want to feel like you can be yourself, share your ideas, and know that the other person really values you, for who you are.
Yeah, like finding those people who energize you, who make you feel like you can be your best self. And, maybe also learning to recognize the ones that might be a little draining
Yep.
or even holding you back.
That's so important. And for Joe, a big part of building those really strong relationships is approaching them from a place of value creation. So it's not about what can I get from this person? It's more like how can we both grow together?
Makes sense. It's about finding that win-win, where both people benefit.
Right. And even before you connect with someone, Joe really emphasizes doing your research, especially in a professional setting, right? Like really look into their background, their values, make sure there's a good fit.
Yeah, so it's more than just, collecting business cards at some networking event. It's about finding those people you truly admire, who you can learn from.
Absolutely. It's about building a network of people you trust, advisors, people you can collaborate with, people who will support you as you're going through challenges and achieving your goals.
One thing that we keep seeing in all of these materials is the idea of gratitude. It's like the secret weapon for building good relationships.
It really is. Gratitude has this amazing way of changing our focus. From scarcity to abundance, from what we don't have to what we do have.
It's funny, I used to think gratitude was this kind of like fluffy idea, something you do on Thanksgiving or something. But the more I learn about it, the more I see how powerful it is. It literally changes your brain, makes you happier, healthier.
Yeah, the research on this is fascinating. They've linked gratitude to all kinds of things, from a stronger immune system to better sleep and even less stress.
Wow, it's amazing how just appreciating the good things in your life can have such a big impact. I also like how they highlight Michael Fishman's work. He's all about making gratitude part of your everyday life.
Right? Fishman really focuses on how gratitude actually helps us rewire our brain to focus on the positive, which, can be incredibly powerful in all aspects of life, work, personal, everything.
So if we want to build those deep, meaningful relationships, gratitude seems to be a key part of that. It's about showing people you appreciate them, acknowledging what they do, and celebrating their successes.
Yeah, I love that. It's about moving from what can I get to what can I give. And that generosity, that spirit is what attracts the right people and opportunities into your life.
This whole conversation is making me think about the times I felt really stuck or overwhelmed. And it's so often because I was trying to do everything myself. Like the more I try to control, the more stressed I get.
Yeah, that's really common,
And
especially these days. Everything moves so fast. And a lot of the material you sent talks about how decision fatigue is a big part of that feeling of overwhelm.
decision fatigue. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's what happens when we have to make so many choices, big and small. Our brains get overloaded, and then it's harder to make good decisions. We get impulsive, make more mistakes, and our willpower just disappears.
Ugh, I know exactly what you mean. Some days it feels like I'm making 100 decisions before I even have my coffee. It's no wonder I'm exhausted by lunchtime.
And it's not just the big decisions,
Yeah,
right? Even small choices, what to wear, what to eat for lunch, all of that adds up. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
it really is. Okay, so what can we do about it? How do we fight this decision fatigue?
Well, you guessed it, delegating to the right who's can really help with that.
Mm.
One of the anecdotes you shared was about Jacob Monty, the labor and immigration attorney. And he decided to hire a driver.
Oh, I remember that one. At first I thought, wow, that's fancy. But then I started thinking about how much energy I waste just dealing with traffic every day. It's really draining.
Exactly. It's not about being lazy or anything. It's about recognizing that your time, your mental energy are valuable.
And because he didn't have to drive, Jacob could show up to his meetings feeling relaxed, focused, ready to do his best work. It's a smart investment in his productivity and his well-being.
Absolutely. And for you, hiring an assistant to do your podcast scheduling had a similar impact. You got your energy back and you could focus on being creative, the stuff you're really good at.
That's so true. It's like we have to retrain ourselves to see delegating as a good thing, as a tool, not some luxury, not a sign of weakness or anything.
I agree. And that's where that time creates money idea comes in. It's about seeing that when we use our time wisely, when we delegate those tasks that we're not great at, then we're free to focus on the things that create the most value,
Yeah.
financially and personally.
Yes. It's not about how much time you spend working. It's about how effective you are with your time. And the Who's, they help us do that, maximize our impact.
Right, like in that story about Dean Jackson and his housekeeper, Mandy.
Oh, I loved that story. It started with a simple request. Dean asked Mandy to make sure his condo was, he called it, 1 week ready. Meaning like everything was taken care of, cleaning, supplies, all of it, so he could just walk in and feel at home.
And the interesting thing is, Dean initially saw it as a way to save himself time and hassle. But as he gave Mandy more and more responsibility, he realized he was also freeing up mental space. And that let him focus on his business, making more money.
It's just like that saying, work expands to fill the time allotted. So when we have more time, when we delegate, we create space for new opportunities, new possibilities.
Yeah, and it goes back to that concept of motivation following demand. When we create that demand for more income, more success, by setting ambitious goals, we often find a way to achieve them.
I see how it all connects. It's like by delegating to the right who's, we get our time and energy back, which then lets us focus on what we're good at and go after bigger goals. And ultimately, that leads to more success, more fulfillment.
Exactly. It's this amazing cycle that can be really empowering. But it means we have to change our thinking from scarcity to abundance, from believing that we have to do everything ourselves to seeing that collaboration is actually a strategic advantage.
This all makes so much sense, but I'm wondering, how do we stay committed to this who not how idea when things get tough? I mean, building a team, delegating effectively, expressing gratitude, it all takes work.
It does, but it's so worth it. And one of the things that helps us stay committed is seeing the positive results.
It's like success breeds success, right? The more we see how delegating and collaborating helps us achieve things, the more motivated we'll be to keep going.
Exactly. Remember that story about Nicole Whipp, the attorney who went from burning out to building this amazing team?
Oh, Nicole's story, I was so inspired by her. She was totally overwhelmed, working all the time, trying to do everything herself.
A classic example of that how mentality.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out all the details yourself, doing everything yourself, often at the cost of your own well-being.
And she didn't want to hire help at first, did she? She thought she couldn't afford it, thought it would be too hard to train someone.
It's a really common fear. So what happened when Nicole finally decided to hire her first employee?
Oh, it was like everything changed. It forced her to really get clear about her vision for her practice and her life. And as she invested in training her team, her confidence grew and she became more committed to building something bigger than herself.
It's a great example of how investing in who's can actually make us more committed to our goals.
Mm.
Because it's not just about our own success anymore, it's also about the success of the people we're working with.
It shows how important it is to create an environment where your who's feel valued, supported, and empowered to contribute their skills and talents. Like you're all in it together.
Psychologists actually have a term for that, escalation of commitment. The more we put into something, a project, a relationship, a team, the more dedicated we become to its success.
It's like planting a seed and then taking care of it,
Right.
giving it what it needs to grow.
Exactly. And for Nicole, her commitment to her vision, to her team, led to this thriving law practice. And it wasn't just about the money. It was about her getting her time and her freedom back.
It really shows how the who, not how philosophy can lead to success and fulfillment, both.
I agree. Now, one thing that might seem a little counterintuitive is the idea of being a who for others.
Yeah.
As much as we need who's to support us, we also need to be willing to step into that role for other people.
I see how that could seem a little contradictory. It's like, wait, I thought this was about getting help, not giving it.
But really, it's about understanding that collaboration goes both ways. The more we help others succeed, the more we create this culture of abundance.